What's it like to fly a Blackhawk at night with night vision goggles? I talked to retired Blackhawk pilot about the midair crash in Washington, D.C. on this episode of Taking Off. Hi, I'm Dan Milliken. It's February 2nd, 2025. As you probably know, unless you're living under a rock, a military Blackhawk helicopter collided with a CRJ regional jet on January 29th, 2025, while the jet was landing at Washington Reagan International Airport. There were 64 people on board the American Airlines Flight 5342 and 3 crew members on the Blackhawk. Sadly, there were no survivors. The NTSB confirmed the Blackhawk had night vision goggles, and it's presumed they were using them. Helicopters, both military and civilian, utilize night vision technology for flying. It's especially helpful when flying low over sparsely populated areas, but can be used in the city. But the technology comes with its own set of challenges, the biggest of which is a narrower field of vision and a lack of depth of vision. Even with the latest generation binocular night vision, the depth of field is not the same as unaided vision. So how tough is flying NVGs? I talked to my friend we've had on the show quite a bit as a designated pilot examiner, but Joe Casey has thousands of hours flying Blackhawks for the U.S. military. I wanted to know more about how NVG might have played a role in this tragedy. Joe, what is flying with night vision goggles in a helicopter at 200 feet off the ground in a major metropolitan area like?
You know, I've never flown in the DC area, but I have flown in a lot of major metropolitan areas. And the big problem you've got with night vision goggles is the confusion with the ground lights that are happening. There's so much light, there's so many bright lights that are around that it's so difficult to pick one thing out over the other. And it makes it very difficult when you're going into certain areas that are known, where you're going to be low level and where you're going to have to deal with the lights that are back there.
How does it affect you spotting other traffic?
Okay, so if you look through night vision goggles, the best way to show it, and this looks crude, but is a couple of toilet paper tubes. I mean, literally, it's like you're looking through toilet paper tubes is the way you envision it. And so if you look at the toilet paper tubes and you picture that what you're looking through the tubes themselves, that is going to be monochromatic, meaning it's going to be one color and various hues of that color. And that's also going to be, it's not going to be binocular, it's going to be monocular. Even though there's 2 of them, we use binocular vision where we triangulate our vision to determine depth perception. We do this every day.
I was wondering about that. So you can tell depth in the night vision goggles?
No, we have what we call
2.
No, even though you have 2, they're 2 separate images on each one, and so they don't triangulate. And so where you use binocular vision and with just your light, in other words, the way you do it is one of the ways you determine depth perception. When you're flying under NVGs, you're flying under 2 monoculars that don't provide an angle, and so what you end up with is you have to use what we call monocular cues. And the monocular cue meaning one, because even though you're using 2 eyes and you can't triangulate, you have to use monocular cues. Yeah, so as an Army pilot, you would learn the monocular cues or memorize them, may be part of your training. But whenever you fly under the night vision goggles, you're using monocular vision, not binocular vision. And so it's monochromatic, meaning one color and different intensities of that color. And it's monocular, so you can't tell depth perception. I think this is going to be one of the findings that they have during this accident, is that whenever you look through the night vision goggles, it's just difficult for you to tell depth perception. And so what you would end up doing is like if I have my night vision goggles, I would look off to the side behind them with the one eye. But now I'm looking with one eye to the side. I would use, so if they were looking at this airplane, you can look at the airplane as it comes by with the night vision goggles, but it would be monocular and monochromatic. And so what a pilot will end up doing is looking to the side beside it to be able to determine the color and to be able to see the specifics of that particular airplane. And so there would be a lot of looking at the object and then looking off to the side and then going the other way and kind of look. So you'd use your periphery around the goggle to determine. So you use both what we would call scotopic vision, meaning night vision. You would use the scotopic vision to be able to see color and see things like if you looked at the airplane where in this case, you would have a different colored lights, white on the tail, a green on this case on the right wing of the airliner. So you'd see a white and a green and you kind of know which direction the airplane's going. But if you look under night vision goggles, you can't see the color. And so you can just see two lights of different intensities. So you'd look under the goggle and then you'd look through the goggle and then under the goggle, through the goggle. You'd have this rhythm, this scanning technique of moving your head around as you're looking at whatever it is you need to see.
So you're saying then that it would be extremely possible that the helicopter pilots in that environment may identify a different plane thinking it's another one. That would be really easy.
It could be, yes, easy to determine. It's easy to see to falsely identify. See one airplane, but there's really another one that there's two airplanes and you identify one to be very difficult in this case. But the idea behind it is that you would, as you're flying in here, all the lights are providing you with illumination of that scene, but then the airplane has lights on it, which are providing illumination, but so does the background. And so it's very, very difficult in those high density airspaces where there's lots of ground lights that are just confusing the situation, lots of stuff to see, and to confuse the lights that are on the airplane with ground lights or anything else. So it's very, very difficult. Night vision goggles work great when you have a moonlit night and you're in an area with high contrast, meaning like if you're flying over a forest with fields and a mountain and there's not a lot of lights everywhere, well, the lights really do stand out. But when you get into an area of super, there's just so many lights in this area, it makes it very difficult to identify one light. So where they may have looked out and saw this airliner, saw the aircraft, and then you look away, but now I have to look back over and reacquire that aircraft. It makes it very, very difficult to be able to acquire and then reacquire because there's so many lights to look at.
Would it be safer in an environment in a major metropolitan area like that with so much ground pollution? Would it make sense I know that the Army's got to train NVG use, but I would think, that would be a point where you flip the NGs off and just use your normal vision, that would be better. Is that true?
Well, a good Blackhawk pilot or a good helicopter pilot will use both. But there's times where you use more of the NVGs. In other words, you're just on a flight, and there's sometimes where you'd be off to the side and look to the side of the NVG. Let me give you a good for instance. I used to be stationed in Korea as a medevac pilot, and we would have to fly from the southern portion of Korea up to Seoul, where there's just gobs of lights, and then landing zone that's very similar to what they had there in Washington, D.C. In other words, a landing zone in the middle of an area where there's lots of other lights around. And we would have to have a local qualification to be able to do it. It would be very difficult whenever you went. Not your normal. It would be it'd be a landing that you would practice with your instructor pilots and get, and it would be one where you'd practice other things and then go do this, because that's just not super easy to be able to do it. So very, very similar in that respect, where to what they're experiencing, which would be a high density area with lots of lights where you need the NVGs to be able to do portions of it, but yet portions of it where the NVGs don't really help you very much, but they're still on, they're still down, they're still using them, but there's just so many lights that they may not be as much use during the entire flight.
The crew, there were 3 crew on the Blackhawk. Is that normal for a training mission of this type?
Yeah, I would say normal. I mean, 2 pilots is all that's required to fly the helicopter. We would routinely fly with 3. On certain missions, there would be 4, especially if you had a lot of passengers or you had a complex mission with sling loads or a rescue hoist or something of this nature, there'd be 4. I would bet that a small portion of my flight experience in the military was with 2 pilots. Rarely would we do that. Most of the time it was with 1 or 2 crew chiefs to make it better. And the reason why is you would have another person to be able to look outside and identify threats and other aircraft. And we had lots of crew coordination that went between the crew chiefs in the back. And I'm going to be interested to find out because there's 4 crew stations, 2 pilots, a crew chief behind each pilot in the crew chief area. I'll be interested to find out if the left crew chief station was unoccupied, because then which would have been legal, but had there been somebody there,
They might have
would they have seen the airliner and been able to say, traffic at 9 o'clock, our altitude closing, and alerted the pilots, who then could have done something about it. I don't know. I would bet that 30 to 40% of my flights in the Army were with 2 crew chiefs on board, and the remainder were with 1. It all depends upon unit readiness and things of this nature.
I've just recently got my rotor add-on. You fly helicopter from the right seat. You fly fixed wing from the left seat. So with those 2 pilots on the Blackhawk, who's sitting where?
It doesn't matter. Both pilots are qualified in both seats of a Blackhawk. We literally would flip a coin, play rock, paper, scissors, do whatever it took to figure out who won it. Sometimes I'd say, well, I haven't ridden in the right seat in a while, I'll take the left seat, or somebody would say they like the left. It totally, on this aircraft, totally just a flip of the coin. Doesn't matter.
Is the Blackhawk always a 2-pilot ship?
Yes, minimum 2 pilots. That's the minimum crew.
Okay, and I guess does it matter who was? And when you have 2, is there a pilot flying and a pilot monitoring like the airlines, or is there do they separate the duties?
No, both pilots are qualified, both seats. You'd have 1 pilot flying and the other pilot not flying, is the way we'd say it.
Okay.
And so I don't know who was on the controls for this particular flight. There's a scenario that builds in my mind of the person in the right seat, whoever that was, flying, and the person in the left seat, with their head to the right, changing the radios, no crew chief in the left seat, and the pilot in the right seat, not able to see the aircraft due to that. They're on the window. There's a structural member between the 2 main windows, and or between the 3 main windows. And so, was that obstructed? Was there a structural illusion going on? Was the person in the left seat, did they have their head down, changing radio frequencies, adjusting whatever? I don't know, but that goes through. I can totally see the accident happening from that scenario, where busy, complex, person in the left seat busy, right seat pilot with or the left seater said, I see the aircraft, and the right seater not seeing them yet, or the crew coordination between the 2 didn't happen. I don't know. I'm surmising, guessing, but I can create the scenario in my mind as I put the many hours that I've flown in Blackhawks into this scenario.
They were at 200 feet. The helicopter route maximum was 200 feet. In the last, few seconds of the flight, they popped up to 400 feet. What happened there, do you think?
Don't know. I can tell you that there's very specific rules that are when you're flying routes in areas with high density airspace like this. And matter of fact, part of the training that I'm sure that they were doing was just making sure that the pilots knew those routes and knew those altitudes, and you don't just bebop into that kind of airspace. You've got to get training. My suspicion is they were higher than they should have been, and it was an accident that they should, in other words, they were inappropriately there, should have been lower. But it's 200 to 400 feet. That's not a lot of,
That's not much.
that's not a whole lot there. That's just a little bit. So
Well, which then goes to the next question. I just cannot believe they've got a helicopter route, even at 200 feet, right there on short final into a major airport. Um, why does the military need to be that close to DCA? Is there something particular about following the Potomac that they need to be right there? Uh, that's one of the questions I'd love to, ask a military general that planned this.
Everything with helicopter routes are usually visual, and a river is a really good visual route that doesn't move, makes it very easy navigation. I think that one of the stories that's going to come from this is going to be wrong altitude, for sure. But I bet they look at the routes that the pilots fly and make sure that there's safety involved. When you get around big cities, big airports, it's very normal to have routes that go in and around through the intricate parts of the city. I can remember flying Blackhawks right down the middle of DFW at low altitude with literally half the airport on my left, half the airport on the right, flying right by the tower. And because that was, at the time, that was the procedure you did. That was a safe place to be. And if you flew that incorrectly laterally, well, it could be a disaster. Same thing here. They laterally we're probably in a good spot, but vertically we're off altitude. But I have a feeling that's going to be a major portion of this accident finding is low altitude.
I want to thank Joe for taking time to give his experience of flying NVGs in a Blackhawk. I know from my own limited experience flying helicopters at night in a big city, the lights are hard to see. The light pollution is incredibly hard to make out. I hope this report gives you some clarity on what the environment and situation was like for the crew on the Blackhawk. I want to thank our sponsors for making this episode possible, like 67 Designs, the best camera, phone, and tablet mounts for your car, your boat, or your plane. 67D.com. Check them out and our other sponsors in the links below. And here's our initial report on the tragic Learjet air ambulance crash in Philadelphia. I really appreciate you guys watching. Remember, superior judgment trumps superior skill. Take care.